Hello everyone, Ivan Conrad here again with another tabletop simulator review and walkthrough of another game. And today I'm going to be tackling a pretty difficult one, and that is New Frontiers, which is a Race for the Galaxy board game. Race for the Galaxy is a very popular card game, but it's a difficult one to get to the table because it's also very difficult to teach. There's a lot of iconography in it, so it's not the easiest game for new players to learn. So they have released a couple of games in the Race for the Galaxy universe, that being Roll for the Galaxy. I believe Jump Drive is one of them as well. And in Roll for the Galaxy for sure, which I've played, they did try to fix some of the iconography issues by giving more instructions on the actual tiles in the game. This game also did the same thing. So it's a little bit easier to get to the table to teach new players. This is a game by Tom Lehman, the designer. We'll look at the credits in the rule book in a second. And I'm going to be using the Tabletop Simulator scripted version by the designer Psychomon. New Frontiers is an action selection game. Action selection is where one player on their turn will choose a specific action to do. That player will actually get a bonus for that action, but every other player will actually be able to do the action as well, just without the bonus. Other games have used this mechanic before, this game mechanic before. Games like El Grande, I believe, was one of the first ones, and Puerto Rico, which is a very popular game, probably the one that cemented action selection as a style of game mechanic. So without further ado, let's move down to the Tabletop Simulator and see how the game works. So here is what the game will look like when you enter the Tabletop Simulator. Just to show you some of the scripts that have been written for the startup of the game, you do have a number of players that you can choose from here. I'm going to have to play as though there are 4 players to show you how the game works. However, I don't have 3 other players at the table, so some of the scripts aren't going to work properly, but I'll get around that, no problem. The other option you have is this your first game or not? We are going to play as if it is the first game. What that will do, it will choose tiles that are a little bit easier to play with. They're a little bit less complicated when it comes to the rules. And you can always go and read the rule book once you've seen the playthrough of the game to see how the other tiles work, and the other tiles will be a little bit more understandable at that point as well. So when you're ready to go, you click on Start Game. And as you can see, it has set up one playmat. I will set up the rest of the playmats right now, and I'll come back to this screen in a second when I'm done. So what is the object of this game? The object of the game is to create an empire of explored worlds. You're going throughout the galaxy, you're going to be exploring worlds, and then you're going to be colonizing them. And you're trying to build an empire that synergistically works well together. Planets will produce goods or resources. Can you sell those goods at other planets to be able to get victory points? That's basically what the game is all about. If we quickly go to the rule book, let's take a look at the credits for the game. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance for the quality of the rule book. I wasn't actually able to find a rule book online for this game. Rio Grande Games must have redone their website, and I read online that there were issues with the original rule book. Some letters were missing during the OCR process. Therefore, I couldn't find an actual rule book for the game. So this is the best I could do. But what I did is I took pictures of the rulebook and I uploaded them. So you can see who the game designer is here and who the artist for the game is. Always a good idea to take a look at that and give credit where credit is due. Let's take a look at setup next. So I'm not going to read everything there is to know about the setup. If you get the game, you'll have to look through the rulebook and make sure that you've got the setup correct. But as you can see, there's different types of setups depending on whether it's your first game or whether you're playing later games. And this happens quite a bit in the setup section here. It's just to make the game a little bit easier to learn. There's tiles that we're going to see that have these little squares on them. And those little white squares are designated as beginner tiles, for lack of a better term. There are also optional goals that you can use in a more advanced game. I'm actually not going to use those in this tutorial. I find them a little bit too complicated to use. You'll notice that we need a certain number of victory points per player. So that's already been set up, and I'll go down to the table in a second and show you that. This will be minus the colonist that goes on everybody's start home planet. You'll notice that each player gets 3 credits to start the game. That is your money to spend. The last player will get +1. In a 4 or 5 player game, also give the second to last player +1 credit. Each player will choose on their player mat, which they will receive randomly, the side with the numbers in the white square. Again, that is just to make the first game a little bit easier. I will show you that on the table in a minute as well. And you will mark the player order with your tokens. So let's go back to the game screen at this point. So you'll notice that I gave everybody 3 credits. We're going to go clockwise, so 3 credits, 3 credits, 3 credits, 3 credits. I'll zoom in to show you what the credits look like. Credits can be taken from the bags. There's $1 credits, $5 credits, and $10 credits. Or in this scripted version, you can actually, if it's your turn, say take money, take 1 or take 5. Same thing with settlers, take 1 or take 2. Now, what are the settlers? The settlers look like these little meeples here. Those can be found over here, and you'll notice that it says 44, but the setup said 12 per player. It is 12 per player. 12 times 4 is 48, minus 4 for all of the ones that go on the starting planets. So if we go down to the player mat here, this is the white square that I was talking about, and if you flip that tile over, it doesn't have the white square on it, and that just designates that this is a more advanced starting civilization or planet, if you will, or world. Over here we will place our tokens for player order. We're going to go clockwise, so white, green, blue, red. So white, green, blue, red. And in the rule book they explain that when you take your turn, you're supposed to place your token in the middle of the 2, moving it towards the front of this tile. But I won't be able to do that because of the scripting. You'll see that it snaps right to the first circle. So I'll be putting them here during gameplay to show you that that player has selected their action, but that every other player has to select their action as well. And then we move it there once the players are done. So these are the resources or goods that you will be receiving on your planets. There is alien technology, rare element, novelty, and genes. I don't remember those names, I just remember the colors. There's a certain value to each one, which you'll see here on this card. Blue is the least valuable, yellow is the most valuable, and I'll get to that card in a second. And we are just about ready to start explaining the mechanics of the game. So as I mentioned earlier, this is an action selection game, and the different actions you can take are listed down here. So you've got explore, develop, settle, trade, consume, produce, send diplomatic envoys, and retreat into isolation. Now you'll notice that the retreat into isolation has the white little square that I mentioned earlier that represents starting game tiles. These are also going to have those little white squares, as you can see on each one. So those are also starting game tiles. That's just to help us in our beginning game here so that we're not looking at tiles that are too complicated. So let's say it's the white player's turn. The white player decides to look at all of the different actions that they can pick. So let's go through them one at a time. Explore. Explore says draw 7. What does this circle mean? So this is some of the icons that you need to get used to. This circle means colonies or worlds. All right. So draw 7 worlds from the universe bag. In the physical copy of the game, you actually have a bag with all of the tiles for the worlds in it. In this game, it's this world scanner here. So you would pick 7 of them out of the bag, and then you get to pick one. Now you'll notice that there's a bonus here. That bonus only applies for that player, the player with the white token. Nobody else gets this bonus, but every other player will get to pick one of those worlds. So the player with the white token will choose one, every other player will choose one, and then it says pick a second one. So the player with the white token will pick a second world after all the other players have chosen theirs. So they'll get to get 2. And then you return any unpicked ones back to the bag. So these are what the worlds look like. We'll just go through them quickly here and kind of explain some of the details that are on them. So the first thing I want you to notice is that there's a cross through this icon right here. This is the icon for victory points in the game. So one of the ways that you're going to get victory points in the game is by colonizing these planets. Right now, this planet wouldn't be worth anything. But if I flip it over, now it's colorful, and the points don't have that red line going through them anymore. So that's one of the icons you need to know about, is what do the points look like. You'll see that there's another one down here with points. I'll explain that one later. There's also another number on the tile, and that is the cost of the planet. Now there are 2 different types of planets in this game, more like 3, but 2 main differences: planets that are non-military and planets that are military. Military planets are planets that have a red outline around the world symbol. This is a non-military planet because it has a black outline around the symbol. The number inside is the cost in credits that you need to spend to be able to get this planet. These icons represent the number of colonists you must have to be able to colonize this planet. So if this was the white player's turn, the white player, let's say, decides to choose that planet. They would take it and they would put it on the unexplored side of their player mat. When you explore it, meaning once you have enough credits to pay for it and you have enough colonists to colonize it, you can choose the action, which I'll show you in a minute, to colonize that by flipping it over and bringing it over here onto this side of your player mat. And as you move up with more and more worlds, now this world will stay here, but you'll fill it in with more and more worlds as you go around. Your player mat will get filled in. If you get across this line, that is going to be one of the end game conditions, which we're going to look at a little bit later on, because there are 4 end game conditions to this game. But that is one of the ways that the game end can be triggered. The first person who gets more than 7 colonized worlds or planets will trigger the end game. So let's look at some of the other planets here. You'll notice that these 2 planets have colors involved around the world icon. That is the type of resource that the planet will generate. Now there's 2 different types of scenarios that will generate resources. Either you'll activate a production to generate a resource, which is one of the actions down here. Again, I'll explain that in a minute. Or you will receive a resource immediately upon colonizing this world. These are called halo planets. This is another one right here. If you get a halo planet, you get a one-time resource immediately as you colonize that planet. In fact, if one of the starting player mats has a halo planet on it, like this one does, that player would immediately get that color of resource on their mat. So any halo planets, like I said, is usually a one-time payment of a resource as soon as you colonize it. I'm going to show you soon that there are ways of getting more resources on halo planets. Here's an example of a military planet. Military planets are different than either halo planets or regular resource planets or gray planets, in the fact that you cannot buy a military planet. You have to have more military might than a military planet in order to colonize it. In essence, you're overthrowing that world. All right? You still need a certain number of colonists, but you need military might. Now, where would you get military might? Well, you may have it on your player mat to start right here. So during the settle phase, it says you may remove one rare element, which is a brown element, good, for +2 military. So some of these powers will give you military might. If you look at some of these developments, which we'll explain in a few minutes, some of those also give military might. So anytime you see a plus with a red number, that represents military might. So you're starting to see some of the iconography in the game, and yes, it can seem a little bit overwhelming, but I will go through all of the different ones just to make sure you understand how they all work. Now here's just a regular blue producing planet with a cost of 2. It'll give you 1 victory point if you colonize it. Here's another one similar to that one. And you'll also notice that they have these bars or rays across them. Some of them do. Those are extra powers that'll activate during the action selection phase. Okay? So exploring allows you to draw a planet, and every other player will also get the same selection. So I'm going to just leave these planets out for when I start the gameplay, and we'll distribute them to the players at that point. Now, I want you to notice that on the explore action, there's an eyeball symbol. So that eyeball symbol is related to that explore action. This diamond symbol is related to all of the diamonds on the development tiles. And as you can see, if a person selects this tile as their action, they will be allowed to build 1 development. They will also get a bonus of -1 to the cost of the developments. So all of the numbers inside the diamonds are the cost for those developments, similar to the numbers inside the worlds, which is also the cost of those worlds. All right. So a -1 to buy those is a pretty nice bonus. And remember, whichever player chooses that tile, every other player will also be able to develop. They just won't get that bonus. And now it's time to talk about a second endgame condition. Let's go to the rule book here. So if you look at the develop action, it says right here, if any player has covered more than 10 mat spaces of developments after a develop action, then the game will end after that round is complete. So on your player mat, you have 12 spaces. The last 2 spaces are in red. You have to cover all of the blue spaces before you can cover one of the red spaces. And if you count how many blue spaces there are 10. So that's what they're referring to when it says to cover the 10 mat spaces of developments. As soon as somebody covers one of the red ones, that is going to trigger one of the end game conditions. Now, settling is the action you have to select if you want to take, and I'll move this planet here just to show you. If you want to move that planet from this side to this side, you have to take that settling action. As long as one player takes it, every other player will be allowed to do so, but this player will get a bonus of +1 colonist. Now the colonists all come from our starting resource bank of colonists. Remember, we started with 12 for each character, for each player in the game, -4 because 1 goes on every starting planet. In this case, there were 4 players, right? But there's also a end game condition attached to this tile. It reads down here, check the remaining number of colonists. If you're under 5, the game ends this round. So that's the second end game condition. If somebody selects this tile, and at that point we're under 5 colonists, therefore the game will end this round. And you could be under 5 colonists either by getting this bonus, or by doing whatever this action here says, which is either to gain 2 colonists or to settle the planet. So what could happen is, remember that every player gets a chance to do this even if one player selects it. Well, if somebody doesn't have enough money, let's say, to colonize their planet, they may want to get the 2 colonists instead. Otherwise, you would choose to colonize if you had the right number of colonists and the right number of military or credits. Now remember, see these 2 black and red symbols here? That means you can settle either, or colonize, sorry, either a non-military planet or a military planet. So with a military planet, you have to have the right military might. With the non-military planet, you have to have the right number of credits. All right. So this is an important tile because it does contain an end game condition. Now, for the next two tiles, I actually don't like the order that they're in, so I'm going to change the order, because before you can trade and consume, you have to be able to produce. Now, to show you how the production tile works, as you see, it says put a good on any of the solid colored planets, whether they be non-military or military. Now, notice there's no halo around here. Now, some of you may have noticed that there is a halo around this one, but I'll get to that in a second. So this is the way that you're going to put goods on all of your colonized planets, including your world planet. So let's say this person had this planet on their player mat. Well, unfortunately, this planet is gray. It does not have a color inside. It does not produce a resource. But if we go over to this player has a brown solid color inside their planet. That means that is a resource or good producing planet. So you would just take the rare element or brown, matching the color of the solid color inside of the planet, and put it on your player mat. So what happens if you have two planets on your player mat that are colonized? So pretend this one is colonized and have solid colors inside of their world icons. Well, then both of them would produce on with that action. All right. So you'll see here it says put a good on all of the planets. It means all of the worlds that can have goods. You'll also notice that a world can only have one good per world, so you cannot stockpile them. So if this planet had produced a good already, it wouldn't produce another one. However, this one would. So all planets in this player's on this player's player mat would generate a good. So that's how that action works. Now, I said I'd explain the bonus. This is where players who have potentially a halo planet that has lost a resource or a good can put another one on there. The only way you can put a good on a halo planet if it doesn't have one is by being the player that chooses this action and gets this bonus. All right. Now you'll also notice it says take all credits on this tile. At the end of the round, if this tile is not selected, you add a credit on it. So this can accumulate credits over and over again. So this is a way to get some extra credits in the game, and therefore it can become a pretty nice tile to activate at some point because of that, even though most players will want to, because it's the only way to produce more resources on their planets. Trading and consuming is one of the more difficult tiles to explain. There are actually two different things that are going on here. Trading means, and it explains it right here, you may sell one good for the number of credits representing on its value based on its color. All right. So if you have goods on your planet, which I've already removed, but let's say you had a brown good on here and anybody played that tile, you could take the good that's on that tile on your world and sell it for the amount of money that it is represented by its color. All right. Then it says use powers to consume goods. Now, the arrow here shows you the symbol for consume. It matches the arrow right here. All right. Now, where would that come into play? So I've set up a scenario here to try to explain to you how these consume powers would work. So somebody has selected the trade consume action. This player has the option of selling one of their goods that they have on their worlds. They choose not to. They have two choices for consume powers. You can see that this is the arrow that matches the consume power, and this is the arrow that matches the consume power. That means they can activate those consume powers because that action was taken. So this consume power says consume up to 3 novelty goods for 1 victory point and $1 apiece. Now, one thing I want to discuss right now as well is you can never have 2 of the same developments on your player mat at the same time. So you couldn't have a second consumer market. But they do have one, and it requires a novelty good, and here's a novelty good. So they would take that novelty good. You don't have to place it on the development. I'm just going to show you where it's being used by placing it there. It's going to get discarded, and then you would get 1 victory point and 1 credit. For this rare element good, they would take it and bring it over here, and this power doesn't require a novelty good. It just says consume 1 good for 2 credits. So any color could go here to activate this one. Now you cannot activate a power twice. So that's one of the reasons why it might be a good idea to put the goods on the powers that you're activating to show that you've used them, and then at the end of your turn you can discard them back to the pools. All right. Now you might say, well, why didn't they just use the blue novelty good here? Because it can take any of the solid colors. It doesn't have to take brown. The problem is this one can only take blue. So if you had put the blue one here, you couldn't then use the brown one in the same spot because its power would have already been used. So that's why the blue one would be there and the brown one would be there. That's the better play. Now, speaking of developments and powers, there are powers on planets as well. If we quickly go to the rule book here, it does say that a power cannot be used in the action in which its tile is placed. Now, it's the action in which its tile is placed. All right. So those are cases that can happen. I don't think they're very common, but that is a rule that you need to be aware of. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there are other powers that can activate. If you notice, this does not have an arrow, it has a circle. This does not have an arrow, it has what looks like kind of a cube. This one has an eyeball. And I had started mentioning that each one of these actions have those symbols on them. So those powers activate matching whatever tile has been activated as an action. So if the explore action is activated, if you happen to have the development that has an explore icon on it, you would gain the benefit of that power. In this case, you'd gain a colonist. The circle goes with the settle one. In this case, it says settle at -2 cost any non-military world. This one, which is a little bit more complicated, says for the settle action again, you may pay for non-alien military worlds. So non-alien means not yellow. Yellow is alien, so it can't be either a halo or a solid yellow alien planet. But this is the military symbol, so non-alien military worlds at -1 cost. Now, -1 cost means it's allowing you, remember, for military worlds, you usually need more military to overthrow the planet. This is telling you that you can actually buy it as though it was a black ringed planet at -1 the cost. All right. So each one of those powers you'd have to read and get used to. You can look it up either on Board Game Geek online or in the rulebook itself. There are too many of them for me to explain right now. If you gain credits from selling goods or using powers, the credits come from the credit pool here. Well, this is another end of game condition. If you ever run out of credits from this pool, that is going to trigger the end of the game. Now, the round will continue until the end of the round, which means more credits can be distributed if other powers activate by other players' turns. You would get those credits from these piles, and you can make change. This is worth 5 victory points here. You can make change as you need to. But the turn in which the credits get emptied from this pool activates the end of the game. Let's move on to the next action that can be activated on a player's turn, and that is to send diplomatic envoys. Now, all that this one does, the only thing it does, is it gives you 1 victory point Oh, and I forgot to mention, by the way, that the trade consume also gives you a bonus of 1 victory point. So remember, that's just the player that activates this. This tile gains you top priority, which basically moves you into the first player position. All right. In which case, if it was the blue player that would do it, they would just slide their token over here. All of these tokens would slide down. The blue player would become the first player at that point. If we now go to the last one, now you'll notice that this is one of the ones that has a white square on it. The back of this tile is a more complicated scenario if you're using the goals that I mentioned near the beginning of the tutorial. We're not playing with the goals, so the only thing that this tile would give you is more credits to spend. And that basically tells us how all of the actions work, and we'd be ready to start looking at gameplay. So let's start going through a few rounds of play just to see how the game plays. We're going to start with the player with the white token first, following player order on the track. And we're going to say that that player is going to explore as their first turn. So as I mentioned before, we're going to move the token just halfway down the track, showing that it's that player's turn and what they're doing. And when you select an action, they recommend that you move the action tile down. Now in Tabletop Simulator, if you actually press the button, it'll pull it down for you. All right. So we've already drawn the 7 planets, and we get to take a look at all of the planets that we might want to explore. So Galactic Trendsetters is worth 5 points at the end of the game. It is a cost of 5. We wouldn't have enough to play that one yet. But you know what? Because it's such a big point planet, I think that's the one that this player is going to take. Remember, that player will have a bonus planet to take at the end of every other player's turn. So next it would be Green's turn to pick a planet. And for Green, let's pick this 3-point planet here. I am not mentioning anything about strategy here, folks. I'm kind of going through it pretty quickly, so don't be following my strategies here. I think this player, -1 cost or +1 military when you settle a rare elements world. Oh yes, they have a Halo planet, so they are supposed to start with the rare elements. So let's take this one for that player. And we will take this one for that player. Okay, so the first player gets their bonus at this point, which is to pick a second planet. And for their second planet, I'm going to pick one that's a little less costly. Now, this one does have a power to consume for extra credits, so I think I'm going to take that planet for this player. And then the other planets return to the bag, which I will shuffle. Okay, so that's that player's turn. Next it's Green's turn, so we're going to place this halfway through to show that it's Green's turn. Now White will still get a chance to do whatever action Green is going to select, even though they've gone first, so we just wrap around when we go through the list. I think Green is going to choose to develop. So they're going to activate the develop. You may build 1 development, and they have 3 credits, but they also get a discount of $1, so they can actually buy something that's worth 4 credits if they want to spend that much. Let's get... Green is going to choose to buy the replicant robots, which is normally 4 credits, but with their discount they're able to purchase it. Replicant robots, if we look at it, is worth 2 victory points at the end of the game, and it says the settle is -2 credits per cost. So that means any planet that you're going to settle is going to be 2 less credits as long as it's a non-military world. So we're going to spend our 3 credits. It's pretty expensive. Credits are actually quite difficult to get in this game as well. Let's see if I can get that into the bag. There we go. All right. And now, so green has gone, so it'll be blue's turn next to do the same thing. They can choose to develop, so they have 3 credits. Now they probably don't want to spend all of their credits. Let's get Galactic Advisors for blue. It's going to cost 1 credit. And then it would be red's turn. Red is going to pass. You don't have to build a development. Therefore, red is going to pass just to save on credits. And now blue has got a pretty expensive planet to buy. I wonder if there's anything else that gives a discount that he can purchase. That player is going to choose to start looking at their military. So they're going to purchase the Space Marines for 2 credits. Alright, so that was green's turn. Now blue gets to pick an action. Blue would like to colonize, but blue only has 2 credits, and this world costs 3 to colonize. Therefore, blue won't be able to do that. Blue also doesn't have any colonists to do so. So blue needs credits, and blue needs colonists. Now blue started with a brown good because of the Halo planet. Now the actual name for Halo planets is Windfall planets. I like to call them Halo planets because it's easier for players to know what they are. But because they have a good, they could consume a good to sell for credits, or they could consume a good to activate the consume power here, which would give them a victory point and a credit. So that's what they're going to do. So they're going to activate the trade and consume, and they get 1 bonus victory point for doing so. So we'll take, and that comes from the pool, and remember that taking victory points from the pool could eventually lead to an end game condition. They are not going to sell, but they are going to use their consume power. So we're going to move this good over to this consume power. We're going to do the consume power, which says spend 1 good for 1 victory point and 1 credit. So they're going to get another victory point and 1 credit. And then they return this good to the pool. Now, does anybody else have the ability to do that? Well, nobody else has any resources or goods on their mats. So they actually can't even benefit from that. And that is actually a strategy in the game, to choose actions that other players can't benefit from, because for them it's almost a missed opportunity. And therefore that is the end of blue's turn, and finally it is red's turn. Now red has some military strength. This planet, however, is not a military planet. They don't have a colonist, but they would get a colonist if they chose to settle, and they do have a credit to be able to pay for that, so that is what red is going to do. Red is going to settle. So they're going to get their bonus colonist. And following what else it says gain 2 colonists or settle once. So we're going to settle this world. Flip it over to the other side, put the colonist on it to show that it's been colonized, spend the credit, which they had 4 of anyway. And this is a windfall or halo planet, therefore it will get a rare earth or a rare element put on it. Now, can anybody else settle? Not enough colonists. Not enough colonists. Not enough colonists. So nobody else can settle. So that was a good thing to do for that player. Now, it does say check remaining colonists. If under 5, the game ends this round. So that's one of the end game conditions. We are way higher than that at this moment. And that is the end of the round. So what happens now is we have to look at this card that says at the end of round, if this tile was not selected, add 1 credit to it. So we'll do that now. And then we reset the player tokens back in the same order. Nobody chose to change the order of first player, therefore we keep the same order. These all return. And then we are ready to continue to the next round. So what should this player do now? Well, this player would like to settle. They have +2 to their military, but they don't have any military planets. So what they need to do is they need to get more credits. To get more credits, now they have a windfall planet. I think I forgot to give them a novelty good for that windfall planet. So that might have actually changed what I would have done. But yes, this is a windfall planet even though it's military. So they would have started with a novelty good. That means that they can sell that novelty good, but that will only give them 1 credit. So that's not a very good deal. So you know what they're going to do? They're just going to activate the retreat into isolation to get 2 credits. Nobody else gets that bonus, so that is the end of that turn. Now it is green's turn. I forgot to move the white player's token up. I'll move the green player's token up. So the green player takes a look at what they have. They don't have any credits either. They don't have a way of generating income because they don't have any goods at the moment, and they can't. This is not a world that produces goods anyway. So because this token has been taken, so even though they can't settle, they're going to select the settle action so that they can at least get some colonists. So they're going to get 1 colonist for the bonus and 2 other colonists for a total of 3 colonists. And hopefully they'll be able to pick up some credits along the way. Now everybody has a chance to settle, but I don't think anybody else can. They don't have enough colonists to settle. They don't have enough colonists to settle, and they don't have enough colonists to settle. So nobody else can settle. So now it's the blue player's turn. Now with every game, usually the beginning rounds are a little bit slower because everybody's just feeling their way through the game's rules, and there may not be actions that are going to be as good as others for certain players. So that is always something to consider when you're starting to play a game. Now this player does have 3 credits, so they do have some options. They can't settle. You know what they're going to do? They're going to choose to explore. So they're going to pull 7 more planets out of the bag, and I'm going to come back after all of the players have chosen their new planets to explore. So I've chosen the planets for all of the players. Probably not necessarily the best choices for some of them, but I'll just show you what they've decided to explore. Remember, these have not been colonized yet. So red has the ability to colonize this planet or to settle the planet, but unfortunately the settle action has already been taken, therefore they cannot take that. This is a military planet, so they could afford to spend some credits to get a development perhaps in order to advance their military maybe. So let's see. There is Space Marines here. Now you'll notice that once this tile has been taken, because somebody already took Space Marines, there are no more of these tiles. There's a set number of tiles based on the number of players, so you will run out of certain tiles if you're not quick enough at buying them. Therefore, I believe that's what's going to happen. They're going to choose to develop. You may build one and they have a bonus of -1. So because Space Marines costs 2, it's only going to cost them 1. So we'll move that over to their playmat. And that'll cost them 1 credit. Now, quick reminder of another endgame condition. If ever you fill all the blue tile spaces for developments, as soon as you put one more in the red spaces, that is going to trigger an end game condition. So they now have a stronger military. With their rare element, they could get +2. With their Space Marines, they have a constant +2. So that means they could potentially buy a military planet of 4 if they explored. And that's the end of that round. At the end of the round, we have to make sure to move all of the action tiles back, and if the produce action was not taken, another credit will go on that tile again. And that's pretty much how the game is played. This game does benefit from multiple plays to learn how all of the developments work, how all of the powers on the planets work, and how all of the bonus points on these 9 cost developments work. These are rather complicated to go through each one. The rules do explain them one at a time. However, I'm not going to go through each one, but just to show you, it does explain at the bottom what it does. So gain $1 for each novelty good you produce. So that's basically like a regular power, but it's these that need an explanation. These are bonus points at the end of the game. So I'll see if I can decipher this one for you. The question mark is because it's based on what you have accumulated. You would get 1 victory point for every 3 victory point tokens you've collected throughout the game, and 1 victory point for every novelty, military, and non-military planet, including the windfall planets, the halo planets, that have been colonized. So that's what this means. Over here, let's take a look at just one more. You would get, so you have the power for a development power, which is -1 cost per development. But as a final scoring, 2 points per terraforming development, 1 point for every other development. So terraforming here is a keyword that some of these would have. As you can see right here, this is terraforming specialists. So that's what this 9-point development gives you, is extra points for those kinds of developments or other developments. So there's some synergy involved with knowing how these work with these and with your planets or worlds themselves. And that you're only going to learn by playing the game multiple times. But the strategies are quite varied and interesting in this game. Remember that you can play with the optional gold tiles, which I have not talked about. I'll let you discover those on your own. But that's basically the game. So I hope you enjoyed the run-through tutorial and review of the game. I really enjoyed this game. It's a bit of a brain burner at first, but once you've played it a couple of times, you start to see those synergies that I was talking about, and it's a very interesting game to put out on the table. So, till next time, folks, keep playing those games. Have fun.